Well, you talked about a kind of sleight of hand that, and I still haven't been able to puzzle this out entirely, because the French postmodernists were the most influential thinkers who levied this challenge to the metaphysics of the West. But they did ally themselves with the Marxists, which is very strange, because the first dictum of the postmodernists is that there's no uniting meta-narrative. Right? There's no story that unites us. There's just a plethora of Hydra heads everywhere, and they're all involved in power games. But despite making that claim metaphysically, they did ally themselves with the Marxists. And I don't know if the Marxism came first and the postmodernism was a rationalization for that. It's probably something like that, because partly what happened in the 1970s, even in France, because there's nothing more intransigent to evidence than a French intellectual, was that the failure of the Marxist system on economic grounds and humanitarian grounds became absolutely incontrovertible in the 1970s. Yeah. No one could stand up and say, that's not real communism. That just became impossible, especially after Solzhenitsyn. And so what happened was the French in particular played this sleight of hand game where the axis of oppression shifted from the economic to the cultural or the racial or the sexual, right? And that's fine, because you can play an oppression game on multiple dimensions. That's what intersectionality is. And so that's how that all arose. And then I think partly the left, the liberals on the left, we talked earlier about the fact that, you're a liberal who decided to be sane instead of insane. I kind of think to some degree, I've been trying to think this through most recently. See, after the election, commentators on CNN, MSNBC, and so forth woke up to the fact that the conservatives had taken over the new media, Joe Rogan being an example. And so this is very comical to me for a variety of reasons, partly because Rogan is a very weird conservative.
Also, you would say more liberal leaning than anything.
More progressive. He voted for Bernie Sanders, so but there's a coda to that story, which is that, I know all the main podcasters quite well, and we invited the DNC to speak to us in 2017. There were 8 of us. Ben Shapiro was one, Dave Rubin, me, Rogan, Brett Weinstein, a whole group of us made a formal offer to the Democrats to speak with us, no games. And we pushed that for 6 years. This is all documented. And they all knew it. The message went out to pretty much all the Democrat congressmen and the senators. And I spoke to many of them behind the scenes. They wouldn't speak to me publicly. We never got one in 7 years who would agree to speak to us. And now they're saying, well, the conservatives put billions of dollars into this new media, which is, of course, complete bloody rubbish. Yeah. Rogan's enterprise is Rogan and his producer. That's the whole cabal, right?
Well, if they don't make that interpretation, then the other interpretation is very damning, that all the billions of dollars, the $1.2 billion that they spent on trying to elect Kamala, that the control of Facebook, the control of the algorithm at Google, the
legacy media,
the legacy media, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, the New York Times.
And the universities.
And that wasn't enough.
I know.
That the American public rejected all of that. Yeah. So the only other way...
free speech triumph.
The only other way to look at it is to attack, well, it must be these well-oiled billionaire conservatives, because it couldn't be us. We're the good guys.
It's so insanely preposterous, all of that. None of these people were capitalized, right? Every single person who became a notable podcaster, almost all of them many of them were comedians, which is extremely funny.
Isn't that unbelievable?
It is. And we will return to that. But also, many of them were disenfranchised liberals, right? Rogan, Rubin, me, I would say.
Absolutely.
Brett Weinstein, for sure.
Well, he lived up there in the most liberal part of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
In Oregon.
And taught at one of the most liberal schools.
And I would say Elon Musk you would put in that category too.
Yeah, well, and maybe even Trump. Although he's not a podcaster, obviously, neither is Musk, but the same sort of thing.
He was a conservative Democrat. You would have to say he's a New Yorker.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely.